They say I need a husband to save my father's ranch, Lillian Parker said, folding the marriage offers shut. From the courthouse doorway, the enormous cowboy everyone called Big Wyatt pulled off his work glove and asked only, "Why not me?" 3 weeks remained before Parker Remount Yard could be forced onto the auction block. Two wealthy ranchers had offered to clear Lillian's mortgage, but both wanted control of her horses, her land, and Cottonwood Fork. She refused them. Then Wyatt Granger, the quiet hired cowboy with a dangerous reputation and barely $1 to his name, made his strange offer. Lillian expected a bargain. Instead, he asked for something that made her wonder why he wanted this marriage at all. If you were Lillian, would you trust him enough to hear his terms? 3 weeks before the bank could take Parker Remount Yard, Lillian Parker sat in the Juniper Crossing courthouse and listened to two men discuss her future as if she had already left the room. Outside, a November wind pushed dust along the boardwalk. A freight wagon rattled past toward North Fork Road, iron rims striking frozen ruts. Somewhere across the street, a blacksmith brought his hammer down 3 times. Inside, Rufus Parker slid 2 folded papers across the clerk's desk. "Either one settles the mortgage," he said. Lillian did not reach for them. She knew what they were. Rufus had explained the arrangement on the ride into town, though he had dressed it in kinder words then. Stability, protection, a household with enough property behind it to persuade the lender to wait. Now the papers made it plain. Both men were ranchers. Both had cattle, cash, and enough standing in the county to make a banker listen. And both wanted something. One wanted authority over the remount stock, the other wanted Cottonwood Fork included in any future household property agreement. Neither had asked what Lillian wanted Parker Yard to become. She finally picked up the first paper. Her eyes moved slowly down the page. She had spent too many years keeping her father's books to be frightened by legal language. She knew how a pleasant sentence could hide an ugly number. She knew what words like management and disposition meant when a man expected another person's signature beneath them. She read the second offer. Then she folded both papers along their original creases and placed them back on the desk. Rufus rubbed his forehead. "Lillian, no. I'm trying to keep the bank from selling the place out from under you, so am I. Then look at what is in front of you. I did." Her voice stayed low. That seemed to trouble Rufus more than shouting would have. He pushed back from the desk. He was 47, heavy through the middle, with a wool coat that always looked a little too good for the work he claimed exhausted him. 3 weeks, he said. That's what you've got. 3 weeks before that mortgage comes due. I know the date. And the winter freight contract isn't signed. I know. Hay prices are up. I bought before the first frost. You still owe for 6 remount horses. 4. I paid the Haskell invoice Tuesday. Rufus stopped. Lillian reached into her satchel and laid the receipt on the desk. The courthouse clerk pretended not to look. Rufus looked anyway. Lillian gathered the 2 marriage proposals and pushed them toward him. "I've been keeping Parker Yard's books since before you knew what we owed," she said. "Don't explain my own ledger to me." For a moment, only the stove made noise. Then Rufus lowered his voice. "Your father is gone." Lillian's fingers stopped against the leather satchel. There it was. Not cruelly said. That almost made it worse. Her father had been dead 9 months. Long enough for condolences to become arithmetic. Long enough for men to stop saying poor Everett Parker and begin saying the Parker estate. She stood. "I am aware." Rufus sighed. "Nobody is saying you can't run the place. 2 men just offered to marry me in exchange for running it. That's not what this is. It is exactly what this is." She buttoned her coat. Rufus followed her into the courthouse hallway. "Lillian, listen to me. Fletcher has made a fair offer for the yard twice. Amos Fletcher wants Cottonwood Fork. He wants access. He wants control. He has the cattle to justify it. And I have the deed, for now." That stopped her. Rufus saw it. His face softened, but Lillian had known him too long to mistake softness for surrender. If the lender forces a sale, he said, you won't get to choose who buys it. Lillian looked through the courthouse window. Across the road stood the livery stable, its roof dark with old weather. 3 horses were tied to the rail. A man was lifting a wagon wheel upright beside the open doors. Even at that distance, there was no mistaking him. Wyatt Granger. Big Wyatt, people called him when he was not close enough to hear. He stood somewhere around 6'7", perhaps a little less after a long day when his shoulders bent with work. His coat strained across his back when he lifted the wheel. He set it against the wall without flourish, wiped his hands on his trousers, and went back inside. 3 years earlier, Wyatt had knocked down a Fletcher foreman. That was the story Juniper Crossing remembered. Details had changed depending on who told it. Some said 1 punch, some said 3. Some claimed Wyatt had nearly killed the man. Lillian had never heard Wyatt tell the story. Mostly, she had never heard Wyatt tell much of anything. Rufus followed her gaze. A short, humorless laugh escaped him. Maybe that's your answer. Lillian turned. What? If neither of those men suits you? Rufus nodded toward the street. Maybe you'd rather marry Granger. The clerk suddenly became very interested in an ink bottle. Rufus kept going. Poor as a fence post. Sleeps wherever somebody has work for him. Half the town crosses the street when he comes toward them. But at least he wouldn't bore you. Lillian's face went still. Enough, I'm making a point. Then make it without using another man's name. The courthouse door opened behind them. Cold air moved through the hallway. Boots crossed the boards. Rufus looked past her, and whatever he had been about to say disappeared. Lillian turned. Wyatt Granger stood inside the doorway. He had a coil of repaired harness leather over one shoulder and a pair of work gloves in one hand. Up close, his size was harder to ignore, but it was not theatrical. He looked like a man built by years of lifting what needed lifting. His nose had been broken sometime in the past. His dark hair needed cutting. A pale scar crossed one knuckle. He looked at Rufus once, then at Lillian. He pulled off the other glove. Why not me? Nobody spoke. A gust rattled the courthouse window. Rufus gave a small laugh, waiting for Wyatt to join him. Wyatt didn't. Lillian studied his face. He wasn't smiling either. You heard that? Enough of it. Rufus stepped forward. Granger, I was making a joke. I know. That was all Wyatt gave him. Then he looked at Lillian again, not at her dress, not at the papers Rufus still held, at her. Lillian had spent most of the morning being spoken around. The difference was small. She felt it anyway. You don't know what he was talking about, she said. No. And you're asking why I wouldn't marry? I asked why not. That's not the same thing. Didn't reckon it was. Rufus muttered something under his breath and walked back toward the clerk's office. Wyatt moved aside from the doorway. He left enough room for Lillian to pass without turning her shoulders. She walked by him. He did not follow. That should have ended it. By sunset, Lillian knew it hadn't. Parker Remount Yard sat nearly 2 miles outside Juniper Crossing, where the freight road widened before bending north. Her father had chosen the place because wagons could water at Cottonwood Fork, change horses, buy hay, repair a broken singletree, and be moving again before losing half a day. Lillian intended to make it better, if the bank gave her time. She sat alone at the office desk that evening with 3 ledgers open beneath an oil lamp. Mortgage feed freight. Numbers did not care about pride. She calculated twice, then a third time. The result did not change. Without the winter freight agreement, she could not cover the mortgage by the due date. If she sold 12 horses, she might. Then she would no longer have enough remount stock to win the contract. She leaned back. Through the wall came the dull knock of a horse shifting in its stall. On the desk lay a blank sheet of paper. Lillian looked at it for a long time. Then she stood, put on her coat, and rode back toward town. She found Wyatt behind the livery, replacing a worn hinge on a stall door. He glanced up when her boots touched the ground. Miss Parker." He nodded once. "Miss Parker. You were serious this morning?" Wyatt set the hammer down. "About what?" She almost turned around. Instead, she said marriage. His expression barely changed, serious enough not to joke about it. Lillian took the folded paper from her coat. 6 months. Wyatt looked at the paper, but did not take it. "The marriage gives me time to settle the estate and refinance the mortgage. Parker Yard remains under my management. At the end of 6 months, if the debt is settled, we end the arrangement. And if it isn't, I'll deal with that when it happens." His eyes stayed on hers. "What's my part?" "You live at the yard. The household becomes established there. You sign what the attorney requires. Anything else, I pay you." "No." Lillian paused. "You haven't heard the amount. Don't need to. I am not asking charity from you, and I'm not offering it." He picked up the paper now. His hands made it look smaller than it was. He read slowly. Lillian noticed that. Not poorly, carefully. When he finished, he handed it back. "Add something." "What?" "I don't sell the yard. You couldn't without, write it." She stopped. Wyatt continued. "No mortgage against it. No transfer. No sale of horses or water rights using my name. Nothing without your signature." Lillian stared at him. "Why?" His jaw moved once. "Because if you're marrying me to keep men from taking your place, it'd be a damn strange bargain if I could take it instead." The livery horse behind him breathed into the cold. Lillian folded the paper. "When can you be at the courthouse tomorrow?" 10. "I'll be there." He picked up his hammer. That was the end of the conversation. They were married the next morning. Nell Quinn stood as witness because someone had to. Rufus attended with the expression of a man watching a wagon choose the wrong fork in the road. Lillian wore her brown wool dress. Wyatt wore a clean white shirt beneath his work coat. When the clerk told them where to sign, Wyatt waited until Lillian finished before touching the pen. There was no celebration afterward. By dusk, Wyatt's saddle and one canvas bedroll sat inside Parker Yard. Lillian showed him the house. "The spare room is down the hall." Wyatt looked toward it, then toward the tack room outside. "Use the back room there. You don't have to." "I know." The answer irritated her for reasons she could not explain. Later, after the lamps were out, Lillian heard his boots crossing the yard. She opened her bedroom door. Wyatt had stopped at the end of the hallway to collect his blanket. "You understand," she said. "I didn't ask you to sleep in a barn." He looked at her through the half-dark. "A license can make me your husband." He lifted the blanket. "It can't tell me what you owe me." Then he left. Lillian remained in the doorway. The house settled around her. Wind moved beneath the eaves. She had expected embarrassment from this marriage. Bargaining, perhaps resentment. She had prepared herself for all three. She had not prepared for a man who kept stepping backward whenever the law told him he could step forward. She slept badly. Before sunrise, she heard an axe somewhere beyond the kitchen window. By the time she dressed and went outside, the yard was empty. Wyatt's horse was gone. A neat stack of split pine stood beside the porch. The corral gate that had sagged for 2 months hung straight on a new hinge. Lillian walked to the office. The cash drawer was exactly as she had left it. So were the mortgage papers. So was the envelope containing the money she had offered Wyatt. Untouched. She stood there with one hand resting on the desk. Outside, morning light spread over Cottonwood Fork and the pale sage beyond it. 3 weeks remained before the mortgage came due. She had married a man she barely knew to keep everything she had spent years building. Yet for the first time since her father's death, the person with the greatest legal opportunity to take something from her had taken nothing at all. And Lillian could not stop wondering why. The answer did not come quickly. Wyatt returned after sunrise with mud on his boots, frost in the seams of his coat, and a sack of oats balanced against one shoulder. He carried it into the feed room, set it down, and went straight back outside. No explanation, no claim on breakfast, no mention of the papers. By 7, Parker Remount Yard was awake. Harness chains rang against hooks. A mule stamped in the north stall. One of the hired hands rolled open the freight shed doors, while Lillian stood in the office with a pencil tucked behind one ear, checking figures against a delivery receipt from Chalice. Wyatt passed the doorway once, then again. The third time he stopped. North Corral Post is rotted at the base. Lillian looked up. Can it wait? Maybe. Maybe is not an answer. It'll hold a calm horse, and an uncalm one? Wyatt glanced toward the yard. No. She closed the ledger. Replace it. He nodded and started away. Wyatt. He turned. Next time, tell me before you pull anything apart. Another man might have bristled. Wyatt only said, All right. That small answer stayed with her longer than it should have. By noon, a bay mare arrived from a ranch south of town. She had been bought cheap because nobody at the auction wanted the trouble of her. The trouble became clear before the rope was off. The mare jerked backward, struck the stall rail, rolled her eyes white, and nearly tore the lead from the hand of the boy unloading her. Lillian came out of the office fast. Easy! The hand cursed and pulled harder. Don't! Wyatt's voice was not loud. It cut through everything anyway. He stepped into the corral. The mare threw her head. A few men stopped working. Everyone knew Big Wyatt could hold a horse if he wanted to. That was not what he did. He took the rope, then he loosened it. The mare backed away until there was nearly 6 feet between them. Wyatt stood still. No sudden reach, no snapping line, no attempt to force her head down. The mare kept breathing hard. Wyatt lowered his own shoulders. That's enough, he said quietly. Not to the horse exactly. Not to anyone else either. Minutes passed. The men around the rail grew restless. Lillian did not. The mare's breathing slowed. Her ears shifted. Wyatt gave the rope another inch, then another. At last, the horse took one uncertain step toward him. Wyatt did not reward it with a grab. He simply waited. By the time he led her into the stall, she followed without fighting. Lillian was still standing by the gate. Wyatt handed the rope to her. She'll need a day before anybody rides her. I know. He looked at her. She looked back. For one beat, neither moved. Then Lillian said, Good. It was the closest thing to praise she had given him. Wyatt seemed to understand that. That afternoon, she rode into Juniper Crossing to settle a hay invoice. Fletcher Cattle and Freight kept a narrow office beside the freight scales, 2 doors down from the general store. Lillian had no intention of stopping there until she saw Wyatt's name on a wage sheet lying open beside the clerk's elbow. 6 days, paid as 4. Another name below his showed the same thing, then another. Lillian leaned closer. The clerk noticed. Something I can help you with? Yes. He looked less pleased when she pointed to the numbers. Those men worked 6 days. Weather stopped half a shift. Half a shift is not 2 days. Fletcher's policy. Then Fletcher's policy is bad arithmetic. The clerk's mouth tightened. Mrs. Granger, Lillian Parker. He glanced at the plain wedding band on her hand. Whatever name you prefer. She ignored that. Correct the slips. Those are settled. No, they're written. Same thing. Lillian reached into her satchel and took out 2 freight receipts. Then I suppose these are settled too. The clerk looked down. They were bills Fletcher still owed Parker Yard for remount service and hay. Lillian tapped the corner. I can wait on payment if Mr. Fletcher can wait on his men. That changed the room. The clerk stared at her. Lillian stared back. A pencil rolled off the desk and hit the floor. Finally, he pulled the wage sheet closer. You've got a sharp way of doing business. No, I keep records. By the time she left, 3 wage slips had been corrected. Wyatt heard about it before she reached home. Nell Quinn made sure of that. He was standing near the pump when Lillian rode into the yard. You didn't have to do that, she dismounted. Do what? Fletcher's pay. I corrected a false tally. For me, for 3 men. Wyatt took the reins from her horse. His fingers brushed the leather below hers, careful not to touch her hand. You were one of them. He nodded. Still, Lillian adjusted her gloves. If a man works 6 days, he gets paid 6 days. Wyatt looked at her a moment longer. Then he said, All right. But there was something different in his face when he turned away. Over the next week, Parker Yard changed by inches. Wyatt stopped treating every repair as his decision. He asked before moving a stack of feed sacks, asked before replacing a broken latch, asked before using timber from the shed. At first, Lillian thought it was stubbornness, then she realized he was making a point of remembering whose place it was. She noticed other things, too. He could read, but freight tallies slowed him down, not because he could not count, because the marks were written fast and small. One evening she found him at the table squinting over a delivery sheet. That's not a 7, he looked up. It looks like one. It's a freight clerk's 4. That's a terrible 4. It is. She pulled the paper closer. This mark means a half load. This one means axle damage. And if they draw a circle around the number, it means the team changed before arrival. Wyatt watched the page, then her finger, then the page again. How long did it take you to learn all that? Long enough to learn not to trust anybody who says the total is obvious. The corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile. She saw it anyway. A few days later, he returned the favor. The morning had warmed just enough to make the road look safe. Lillian stepped onto a patch near the barn and felt Wyatt's hand close around her forearm. Firm, immediate, then gone. She stopped. A thin glass of ice lay over frozen mud. She had not seen it. Wyatt pointed with his boot. Morning sun doesn't hit that stretch till near 10. Lillian looked at the spot, then at him. You could have said something. You were already stepping. You grabbed me. I did. His face changed. If you don't want me to, it's fine. He stopped speaking. Lillian took another step, this time around the ice. Neither mentioned it again. But that night, when she poured coffee after supper, she set his cup closer to the stove before handing it over because she had noticed he always waited for it to cool less than she did. The first real storm came 8 days later. By mid-afternoon, the sky above Grey Wolf Ridge turned the color of old iron. A freight boy arrived at Parker Yard soaked through at the shoulders. Wagons stuck past the west cut. Lillian came out of the office. Who's Harlan Supply? What cargo? Medicine, flour, lamp oil. Her jaw tightened. The Harlan load was tied to the winter agreement she had been trying to secure. If it was abandoned on the ridge and spoiled, the freight company would find another stop. Wyatt was already pulling on his coat. You stay here. Lillian looked at him. He stopped. She did not raise her voice. Try that again. Wyatt's eyes narrowed slightly. Then he looked towards the ridge. Snow had started falling. Not heavy yet. Enough. You know that road? I know the lower cut. Upper half gets worse fast. I know. He studied her for 1 second. 2. Then he said, Then I ride with you. They took 2 saddle horses and a pack mule with rope, blankets, a lantern, and a short-handled shovel. By the time they reached Grey Wolf Ridge, snow had swallowed most of the wagon tracks. The stranded wagon leaned toward the ditch, one rear wheel buried to the hub. The driver stood beside the team, cursing softly. Lillian climbed down first. How many crates? 6 medicine, 12 flour, 4 oil. We moved the oil last. Wyatt looked at her. Why, if the wagon shifts, I would rather lose lamp oil than medicine. He nodded. No argument. They worked in the darkening cold. Wyatt dug around the wheel. Lillian loosened cargo and shifted weight. The driver handled the team. For a while it almost worked. Then one horse spooked. The wagon lurched. Lillian's mare, tied near the slope, reared against the line. She turned at the sound. Too late. The rope snapped tight around a scrub pine and pulled the horse sideways toward the drop. Wyatt moved before anyone shouted. He caught the lead rope in both hands and braced. The mare fought him. Snow broke loose beneath his boots. Lillian saw his left shoulder jerk hard. Let go! He didn't. Not yet. He shifted the rope around the pine, gave the mare room, then released tension the second her footing returned. The horse scrambled upward. Wyatt dropped to one knee. Lillian reached him. Your shoulder. It's fine. No. He tried to stand. She put one hand against his chest. Wyatt looked down at her hand, then at her face. He sat. That surprised her more than the injury. The wagon could not be moved before dark. They carried the medicine and flour to an old survey line cabin less than half a mile away and left the driver with the team under a canvas brake. Inside, the cabin smelled of dry dust, old wood, and cold iron. Lillian lit the lantern. Wyatt sat on a bench with his coat off. His left shoulder sat wrong. Not badly. Enough. Can you move your fingers? He did. Any numbness? No. Good. She folded a blanket into a sling. You've done this before. My father once dropped a wagon tongue on his arm. That sounds like Parker. Lillian's hands stopped. What does that mean? Wyatt looked toward the fire. Nothing. She tied the sling. Too many small things had begun feeling like that. Nothing, nothing, nothing. Outside, wind pushed snow against the wall. Lillian added another piece of wood to the fire. Then she noticed scratches in the timber beside the chimney. Old carvings, names, dates, men who had waited out storms here long before them. She took the small knife from her pocket and scraped away a crust of dirt. One line appeared, E. Parker, 1885. Her breath stopped. She scraped lower. Another set of letters sat only inches away, W. Granger, 1885. The room went very quiet. Lillian turned slowly. The knife was still in her hand. Wyatt had seen what she found. He was no longer looking at the fire. He was looking at the floor. Lillian's voice came out low. How long have you known my father's name? Wyatt did not answer at once. The fire snapped between them. Snow scraped against the cabin wall in dry little bursts, and somewhere outside one of the horses struck a hoof against frozen ground. Lillian closed the knife. Wyatt, since 85. 4 years. She looked again at the names cut into the timber. E. Parker, W. Granger. Close enough that the same hand might have cleared the bark before both were carved. You worked with him? Not the way you're thinking. Then tell me what way I'm thinking. Wyatt lifted his eyes. His injured arm remained in the sling she had made. With the other hand, he reached inside his coat. Lillian stiffened. He noticed. His hand stopped. Paper, he said. Nothing more. He slowly drew out a worn leather wallet, opened it on his knee, and removed a folded piece of yellowed paper. He held it toward her. Lillian did not take it immediately. What's that? Something I should have given you before now. She crossed the room and took it. The paper had been folded so many times the creases had nearly worn through. Pencil marks covered one side. Distances, fence posts, a rough bend representing Cottonwood Fork. She knew the handwriting. Her father's sevens always leaned too far forward. Lillian sat down. For a moment, Wyatt disappeared from the room. She saw her father at the office desk, spectacles low on his nose, tapping a pencil against a freight invoice while pretending not to hear her correct his arithmetic. Then the cabin returned. Where did you get this? From him. When last time I saw him? Lillian raised her head. Wyatt looked toward the fire. In '85, I was writing for Fletcher. The words changed the air. You worked for Amos Fletcher. 2 seasons. You never thought that worth mentioning? Thoughts about it. That isn't what I asked. No. His answer was quiet. No, I didn't tell you. Lillian unfolded the page another time. Start at the beginning. Wyatt leaned forward, forearm resting on his knee. Your father noticed Cottonwood Fork running lower near the south pasture. Not enough to dry it. Enough that he started checking. He wrote about it, I know. You read his books? He showed me one. That surprised her. My father trusted you. Wyatt took a while before answering. Enough to ask me a question. What question? Whether Fletcher's south fence had always been where it was. Lillian looked down at the rough map. Wyatt continued. I'd been repairing fence for Fletcher. I knew those posts. Parker asked me to walk the line with him after dark so nobody would know he was checking. Lillian glanced toward the carved wall. This cabin. We spent one night here. What did you find? Wyatt's jaw tightened, a marker that didn't belong where it was. The fire settled lower. He reached for another piece of wood, then remembered his shoulder and stopped. Lillian put the wood on herself. Neither acknowledged it. How far? She asked. Enough to matter. How far, Wyatt? Maybe 40 yards from the line shown on Parker's description. Lillian's fingers tightened around the field note. And the water? A shallow trench had been cut above the bend. Brush laid over part of it. It fed toward Fletcher ground. Who dug it? I didn't see that part. But I saw Fletcher's foreman move the marker. Lillian went still. The same foreman Wyatt had struck. She understood before he said it. You saw him. Yes. And my father knew, I told him. What did he do? Said he'd take it to the county recorder. Lillian stood so quickly the bench scraped the floor. He never did. No, he died before he could. Wyatt looked at her. Yes. Her father's wagon had overturned on North Fork Road. That was what everyone had said. A broken wheel on a bad grade. No mystery, no accusation. Just one more frontier road taking a man who had traveled it too many times. Lillian turned toward Wyatt. Are you telling me Fletcher killed my father? No, the answer came immediately. I don't know that. I never saw anything that proves it. And Parker never told me anyone threatened him. She held his gaze. Wyatt did not look away. Good. She would not have forgiven him for feeding her a suspicion simply because it hurt. What happened after? I saw your father 2 days before the accident. He gave me that page. Why you? He said if his copy disappeared, somebody ought to have another. And you kept it, just for 4 years. The word landed harder each time. Lillian paced once across the cabin. After he died, why didn't you bring it to me? You weren't here. I came back. I know. You've seen me in Juniper Crossing for months. I know. Then why? Wyatt's face closed. It was the same expression she had seen whenever somebody mentioned the old fight. Lillian waited. He finally said, because 3 days after Parker died, I found Fletcher's foreman outside the freight office. She said nothing. He'd been drinking. Started talking about Parker. Said he'd been chasing lines on paper because he couldn't stand Fletcher doing better than him. Wyatt looked at his right hand. The scar across his knuckle caught the firelight. He called your father a fraud. And you hit him, yes. Once? Wyatt's mouth tightened. Enough. That was not an answer, but Lillian did not need details. What happened? Fletcher fired me before sundown. Foreman told everybody I'd attacked him because I had a grudge. By morning, I was the angry hired hand who'd been sneaking around Fletcher property with Parker. And the field note would have looked like something I made up, so you decided to keep it. I decided not to make things worse. For whom? That stopped him. Lillian stepped closer. For my father, Wyatt said nothing. For me, still nothing. She gave a short breath that held no humor. You didn't even know me. I knew Parker had the daughter. So that gave you the right. No. The answer was immediate. Lillian stared at him. Wyatt looked tired now. Not from his shoulder. You've had that paper every day since we married. Yes, you sat at my table, yes. You watched me count what was left before the mortgage came due. His eyes dropped. Yes, you knew Fletcher wanted Cottonwood Fork. Yes, and you said nothing. I thought if my name got tied to your claim, Fletcher would use it against you. You thought. Wyatt lifted his eyes again. I was trying to keep my trouble from becoming yours. Lillian folded the field note carefully. Once. Then again, her hands did not shake. That's a fine thing to call it. Wyatt frowned. What? Your trouble. She slipped the note into her coat. You keep stepping back so carefully, Wyatt. You ask before moving a fence board. You ask before touching something that belongs to me. You slept in a tack room because you wouldn't let a marriage license decide what I owed you. His face changed, just slightly. But you made this decision for me without asking at all. Lillian, no. She raised one hand. He stopped. That hurt more than if he had argued. You gave me room to choose everything, except the truth that frightened you. The cabin became silent. Wyatt's good hand closed slowly over his knee. I was wrong. Lillian had expected resistance, excuses, maybe even anger. His admission left her with nowhere to put her own. She looked away. We get the wagon down tomorrow, all right? Then we go home. Wyatt nodded. Neither slept much. By noon the next day, the storm had broken. They freed the freight wagon with the driver's help and brought the medicine, flour, and oil down from Grey Wolf Ridge. People at Parker Yard cheered when the wagon rolled in. Lillian did not. She went straight to the office. Wyatt carried his saddle toward the tack room. That evening, she found him moving his bedroll back into the small room behind it. He did not pretend otherwise. You don't have to do that tonight, she said. Wyatt paused. Lillian hated herself for saying it, not because she wanted him gone, because part of her didn't. Yes, he said. I do. She folded her arms. 6 months was the agreement. I remember. You don't leave before then. I won't. And after? Wyatt looked past her toward the dark yard. I'll go. The words were simple. Too simple. Lillian felt something tighten beneath her ribs. She refused to name it. Fine. Wyatt nodded. Fine. The next morning, the sound of a saw came from the barn. Lillian found him cutting pine boards. What are you making? A crate? For what? My things. She looked at the half-built box. There was not much in Wyatt's life that would fill it. A spare shirt, a whetstone, 2 books, a shaving cup. Maybe the old photograph she had once seen him tuck into his saddlebag without explaining. 6 months, he was already preparing to leave. Lillian turned away before he could see how long she had looked. For the next several days, they became polite. That was worse than anger. Wyatt worked. Lillian kept the books. They passed each other in doorways and made room. At supper, he ate in the tack room. At night, his lamp burned beyond the yard. Lillian could see it from the kitchen window. Once, she stood there with 2 cups of coffee before realizing what she had done. She poured one back into the pot, then she took her father's field note to the office. If Wyatt had been wrong to decide what she could know, she would not answer by refusing to know it. She laid the page beneath the lamp, distances, fence marks, Cottonwood Fork, numbers she had studied before, then something near the bottom caught her attention. Book 17, NF. She had assumed NF meant North Fence, but her father never abbreviated fence that way. He wrote FNC. Lillian pulled an old freight ledger from the shelf. North Fork Road appeared dozens of times, always the same abbreviation. NF. She sat very still, then she remembered Curtis Bell. The old county surveyor had retired years ago, but Nell Quinn once said Bell kept copies of field books because he trusted his own shelves more than the county office. Lillian looked again at the notation. Book 17. Not a private notebook, a survey book. She stood. Outside the office window, Wyatt crossed the yard carrying another board toward the unfinished crate. Lillian watched him until he disappeared into the barn. Then she closed her father's field note inside the ledger. Whatever Wyatt had hidden from her, she would not let him decide the next part. And if Curtis Bell still had Book 17, the fight over Cottonwood Fork might be about far more than water. Lillian rode into Juniper Crossing before breakfast. The cold had hardened the wagon ruts overnight. Her mare's breath drifted white past the bit, and frost lay silver along the sage. She did not tell Wyatt where she was going. That bothered her before she reached town. She went anyway. Nell Quinn was sweeping snow from the general store porch when Lillian dismounted. "Curtis Bell," Lillian said. "Where does he live?" Nell rested both hands on the broom. "Depends who wants him." "I do. Then behind the old church. Green door. Knock hard. He claims he can hear fine. Can he?" "Not when he owes somebody money." Lillian almost smiled. "Almost," Curtis Bell answered after the third knock. He was 66, narrow as a fence rail, with white whiskers and suspenders over a faded red shirt. The room behind him smelled of coffee, lamp oil, and paper. Lillian showed him the field note. Bell's expression changed at Book 17. "Where'd you get this?" "My father. That was enough." He led her inside. The field books were kept in wooden crates beneath his bed, wrapped in canvas against damp. Bell complained the entire time he searched. County clerks, mice, bad indexing, men who borrowed pencils and never returned them. Then he stopped. A black ledger rested in his hands. Lillian pulled a chair closer to the window. For nearly 2 hours, she compared Bell's survey entries with her father's note. Cottonwood Fork came first. The old boundary followed a stone marker above the natural bend, not the newer post Fletcher's men had treated as the line. That alone mattered, but Lillian kept reading. Her father had written NF North Fork. She turned 3 more pages. There it was, North Fork Freight Road. Bell leaned over her shoulder. "Huh. What? That road wasn't where it is now." Lillian looked up. Bell found an older map. The freight road had shifted east after a washout years earlier. The replacement route crossed the Parker boundary before joining Public Road farther north. Lillian took out a freight receipt. Fletcher Toll Station. She compared the mileage, then another receipt, then another. Her pulse quickened. "Mr. Bell, I see it. Fletcher's been collecting toll here. Looks that way. How much of the road?" Bell measured the map with a brass divider. Near 2 miles, Lillian sat back. For years, Amos Fletcher had behaved as if he owned the narrowest, safest freight crossing between the ranch country and the northern mine road. He didn't. Parker Yard held the better legal crossing. Cottonwood Fork was only part of it. Water kept horses alive. The road brought every horse, wagon, invoice, sack of flour, keg of nails, crate of medicine, and mining shipment past whoever controlled that crossing. Lillian looked at the map again. For the first time in weeks, the mortgage did not look like the largest number in her future. "If I can establish this with the county..." Bell scratched his beard. "Fletcher's toll claim gets mighty uncomfortable, and a freight company could contract through Parker Yard without paying him. That'd be my reading." Lillian carefully closed Book 17. She did not smile. She was already calculating. By afternoon, 3 freight receipts lay beside the survey copy on her office desk. By evening, there were 9. The next morning, she sent a message to a freight agent who had refused her winter contract 2 weeks earlier. This time she included mileage, and no Fletcher toll. He came to Parker Yard himself. Wyatt saw the man's wagon arrive. He said nothing. For 2 days, Lillian and Wyatt moved around each other as if the house had developed invisible walls. He worked outside. She worked inside. His crate grew closer to finished. At supper, there was still one empty chair between them, yet when Lillian found the stove low one morning, fresh kindling was stacked beside it. When Wyatt came in after dark, his torn glove was lying repaired on the bench. Neither mentioned either thing. On the third afternoon, Amos Fletcher rode into Parker Yard. He came alone. That made Lillian more cautious than if he had brought 10 men. Fletcher dismounted slowly, brushed snow from his coat, and walked into the office. "I hear you've been visiting Curtis Bell," Lillian kept writing. "Juniper Crossing talks fast. It always has." She finished the line before looking up. Fletcher smiled. "I'd hate to see you spend money chasing old lines that don't mean what you think. I haven't spent any yet." He placed his gloves on the desk. "Your mortgage still comes due, so I've heard. Sell me Cottonwood access. I'll settle the debt. You keep the house, the remount business, whatever name you like on the sign. And North Fork?" Something flickered in his eyes. "They're small enough." Lillian leaned back. Fletcher picked up his gloves. "Roads move. Boundaries don't move because a road does." His smile disappeared. "Be careful what you build on old paper." Lillian closed her ledger. "Be careful what you've been charging toll on." Fletcher stared at her, then he left. Wyatt was standing beside the corral when Fletcher mounted. The two men looked at one another across 30 feet of frozen ground. Wyatt did not move. Fletcher rode away first. That night, the freight agent sent word. A 12-wagon convoy would test the Parker route 2 nights later. If it passed safely, he would discuss a 3-season supply contract. Lillian read the note twice, then folded it into her ledger. 2 nights. It was enough time for Fletcher, too. Wyatt found the cut fence shortly before sunset the next day. He had been checking the upper pasture when he saw cattle tracks where none should have been. The wire had not broken, it had been clipped. He rode back hard. Lillian was at the office table when the door opened. "Fletcher cattle are loose above North Fork," she stood. "How many?" "Enough." "The convoy comes through after dark." Lillian reached for her coat. Wyatt blocked the doorway without meaning to. She stopped. His face changed immediately. He stepped aside. "I'll go to the ridge. I'm coming." "Lillian." She looked at him. He caught himself. For 1 second, the old argument stood between them. Then Lillian fastened her coat. "You handle the cattle. I'll stop the wagons." Wyatt's eyes stayed on hers. "Blind Bend is iced. I know. Use the lower approach." "I know," he nodded. No order, no argument. They rode out together. At the fork, Wyatt turned uphill. Lillian went north. Neither looked back. Darkness settled fast. The North Fork road ran between a rock wall and a drop toward frozen cottonwoods. Lillian could hear the convoy before she saw it. Harness bells, wheels, men calling to teams, too fast for the bend ahead. She rode to a widening in the road, dismounted, and lit the freight lantern from her saddlebag. 3 slow swings, stop, nothing. Again. 3 slow swings. The lead driver finally saw her. "Hold!" Brakes groaned. Chains rattled. The first wagon slowed. The second nearly crowded it. Lillian moved down the line, calling spacing numbers. 20 feet! Keep 20! A driver shouted. "What's wrong?" "Cattle on the road beyond the bend." "How do you know?" "Because they're mine to keep off your wheels tonight." The man stared at her. Then he pulled his brake harder. Up on the ridge, Wyatt found the cattle spread across the road. 2 ranch hands were already trying to turn them. Then a horse came out of the dark. Fletcher's foreman, the same man Wyatt had hit 3 years before. Granger. Wyatt dismounted. "Open the south gate," the foreman smiled. "Still taking Parker orders?" Wyatt began moving toward the cattle. The man stepped into his path. "Funny thing. Parker gets himself killed chasing lines, and now his daughter sends you chasing them too." Wyatt stopped. His hands went still. The ranch hands nearby watched. The foreman knew exactly where to push. "Maybe you'll hit me again." Wyatt looked at him. "Move! Go on!" The foreman's hand dropped toward his revolver. Wyatt moved first, not with a punch. He caught the man's wrist, turned it away, and took the revolver before it cleared leather. The foreman stumbled against the fence. Wyatt held him there. 1 second. 2. His face was close enough that the other man could see what 3 years had changed. Wyatt's grip loosened. He stepped back. The revolver remained in his hand. "Open the gate." The foreman stared at him. One of the ranch hands did it instead. The cattle began moving. Down the road, Lillian saw the first animals appear beyond the bend, then Wyatt. He rode behind them, broad shoulders dark against the snow. The convoy was safe. Nobody cheered. Men simply breathed again. Sometimes that was enough. By morning, the story had reached town, not the old story. A new one. The foreman had cut the fence. Several ranch hands had seen the wire. They had also seen Wyatt refuse the fight everyone expected him to finish. By noon, the foreman understood Fletcher intended to blame him for the whole thing. He went to the county examiner. Evening. Bell's Book 17, the old tax descriptions, Parker's freight receipts, and the foreman's statement sat on the same desk. The examiner suspended Fletcher's toll claim pending a formal boundary review. It was not victory, not yet, but it was enough to make the freight agent shake Lillian's hand before leaving Parker Yard. "Get me the final crossing decision," he said, "and we'll talk 3 seasons." Lillian watched his wagon disappear. Wyatt stood near the barn. Their eyes met across the yard. There were a dozen things she might have said. "Thank you. I'm sorry. Stay." He gave her a small nod. She returned it. That was all they could manage. The next morning, Lillian carried 2 cups of coffee toward the tack room. She stopped before reaching that door. Wyatt's saddle sat beside it, blanket rolled, rifle secured in its scabbard, and beneath the window stood the pine crate, finished, closed, ready to be loaded. Lillian stood in the cold with 2 cups of coffee in her hands. One was hers, the other was Wyatt's. Steam lifted between them and disappeared. She looked at the crate, then at the saddle beside it. Nothing had happened that morning. No argument, no goodbye, no slammed door. That somehow made it worse. Wyatt had told her he would leave when the 6 months ended. He had simply believed himself. Lillian set his coffee on the tack room step. Then she carried hers back to the office. There was still work to do. For the next several weeks, winter loosened its hold on Juniper Crossing by degrees. Snow withdrew from the south-facing slopes first. Cottonwood Fork broke open along the edges, black water showing beneath white shelves of ice. Freight wagons returned to North Fork Road, their wheels cutting through thawing mud where frozen ruts had been, and paper began doing what fists never could. Curtis Bell testified before the county examiner. Book 17 was compared against the original tax descriptions. The moved marker near Cottonwood Fork was rejected. The old survey line was restored. Parker Yard retained its lawful use of the water crossing. Then came North Fork. Nearly 2 miles of the road Fletcher had treated as his private toll route fell outside his legal boundary. The toll remained suspended. Amos Fletcher protested, then protested again. The county could argue the rest through spring. Lillian no longer needed to wait for it. The freight agent returned on a muddy Tuesday carrying a leather document case. He sat at the Parker office desk while Lillian read every page, 3 seasons, hay, remount horses, emergency wagon repair, water access, scheduled supply storage for northbound freight. She reached the final number and read it again. It was enough, not enough to make her rich, enough to make Parker Yard difficult to take. Something wrong? The agent asked. No, Lillian turned back one page. I don't like this clause. He leaned forward. Which? You can cancel after one season if mine output falls. Standard language, then standard language can change. The agent laughed once. Lillian did not. He stopped laughing. They spent another hour on it. By the time she signed, cancellation required written notice and payment on contracted winter hay already purchased. Lillian sanded the ink herself. The next morning she rode into town and placed the contract before the lender. 2 days later, the refinancing papers were approved. She read those too, every line. When she walked out of the courthouse, Rufus was waiting near the hitching rail. You got it? Lillian buttoned her coat. I got it. The mortgage? Refinanced. Rufus looked across the street toward the freight office. And Fletcher can buy his water somewhere else. For once, Rufus had no advice. He took off his hat and rubbed the brim between his hands. I was trying to keep your father's place from being sold. I know. I didn't think, no. Lily looked at him. You didn't. Rufus accepted that. After a moment, he nodded. I'll withdraw the estate petition. Thank you. He put his hat back on. Lillian. She waited. Your father would have been proud. Her face remained still, but her hand tightened once around the reins. He would have complained about the interest rate. Rufus smiled. That too. She rode home beneath a sky beginning to show spring. The first thing she saw was Wyatt repairing the north gate, the same gate he had fixed the morning after their wedding. He had one boot braced against the lower rail while he tightened a hinge bolt. Lillian dismounted. The bank approved it. Wyatt stopped. For a moment he did not move, then he set the wrench down. Good. 3-season contract. His eyes lifted. 3? That's good, Lillian. She waited for more. There was none. Wyatt picked up the wrench. Lillian took her horse toward the barn. She understood then. He had been waiting for this too. Not for the yard to fail, for it to survive without him. The 6-month agreement ended 4 days later. Lillian knew the date because she knew every date that could cost her property. She had not realized Wyatt knew it too. That evening, she came into the kitchen and found him standing beside the table. The marriage agreement lay there. So did the tack room key. His crate waited outside on the wagon. Lillian stopped. Wyatt had washed and changed his shirt. That detail hurt more than it should have. You've got your station, he said. Lillian looked at the papers. You've got your road. She looked at him. You don't need me now. The room became very quiet. A kettle ticked on the stove. From the barn came the soft knock of a horse against its stall. Lillian could have said 100 things. She could have reminded him that he had hidden the truth. She could have told him that building a crate before the marriage ended had been another decision made without asking her. She could have asked him to stay. She did none of them. No, she said. Wyatt's face did not change. I don't. Something passed through his eyes, small, gone quickly. He nodded. All right. He picked up his coat. Lillian hated the steadiness of his hands. At the doorway, Wyatt stopped. I'm sorry. She looked at him. For the field note, for deciding what you could carry, that was different. Lillian said nothing. Wyatt continued. I spent a long time thinking leaving people out of my trouble was the same as doing right by them. He glanced toward the yard. Turns out sometimes it's just leaving, Lillian swallowed. You learned that late. Yeah. He put on his hat. But I learned it. Then he walked outside. Lillian stayed in the kitchen. 1 step. 2, 3. She heard the crate shift when he lifted it. Wood against wagon bed. 4 steps. 5. She closed her eyes. The first time she had chosen Wyatt Granger, she had been 3 weeks from losing Parker Yard. She had needed a name on a marriage license, a household the estate could recognize. Time, protection written in ink. She had chosen him because every other road had narrowed. Now the mortgage was refinanced. The water was hers to use. The freight road was open. The contract was signed. Nobody was forcing her. Nobody was waiting at a courthouse with terms. Nobody was telling her what survival required. For the first time, there was no reason to choose Wyatt. Lillian opened the door. He had reached the wagon. No. Wyatt turned. She stepped onto the porch. "I don't need you." He stood very still. Lillian walked down the first step. "The first time I chose you, I needed a husband." The wind moved a strand of hair against her cheek. "This time I don't need one." Wyatt's hand remained on the crate. His face had gone unreadable. Lillian crossed the yard. She stopped several feet from him. The distance was familiar. He had given it to her from the beginning, at the courthouse, at the livery, in the house, beside the frightened mare. On Grey Wolf Ridge, even when he had failed her, it had not been because he wanted to own her. It had been because he had never learned that staying could require more courage than stepping away. Lillian looked at him. "Why not you?" Wyatt did not move. For once, the silence between them was his uncertainty. "Lillian." She waited. "If I stay, I don't want it to be because of what happened on that ridge. It isn't. Or Fletcher. No, or your father. No." His voice dropped. "Or because I helped." Lil took one step closer. "You still don't understand." Wyatt looked at her. "I don't want to owe you," she said. "I want to choose you." Something in his face finally broke. Not dramatically. His jaw loosened. His shoulders dropped half an inch. The man who could hold a frightened horse without forcing it, stop a wagon line in bad weather, and stand in front of an armed man without throwing the punch everyone expected, suddenly looked as if he had no idea what to do with his hands, so Lillian solved that problem for him. She reached out. Her fingers closed around his. Only then did Wyatt move. His hand turned beneath hers and held it, carefully, as though the choice still belonged to her even after she had made it. "You sure?" he asked. Lillian looked toward the wagon. No. Wyatt blinked. Then she looked back at him. "But I wasn't sure the first time either." A quiet sound escaped him. It took Lillian a second to realize Big Wyatt Granger was laughing. She smiled. "Bring your crate back inside." Wyatt looked at it. Barn, not the tack room. Don't push your luck." That made him laugh again. This time she joined him. Spring came slowly to Juniper Crossing. The freight company painted a new sign before the first full northbound run. Parker and Granger Remount and Freight Lillian argued about the lettering. Wyatt let her win. He claimed he had never been arguing. She told him that was worse. Nell Quinn came out from town just to see the sign and brought a tin of coffee neither of them had ordered. Curtis Bell complained that nobody had named anything after Book 17. Rufus brought a sack of nails and wisely offered no advice. Fletcher's toll remained suspended while the county finished sorting through his claims. Parker Yard did not wait. The first large spring wagon rolled into the yard shortly after sunrise. Harness bells sounded before the wheels appeared. Lillian stepped from the office with her ledger beneath one arm. 6 teams, she called. Wyatt was already leading a fresh remount from the corral. 7.6, rear wagons limping. Lillian watched it come through the gate. One wheel leaned slightly. 7, she admitted. Wyatt glanced at her. She pointed her pencil at him. "Don't enjoy that too much. Wouldn't dream of it." They walked toward the incoming freight together. Not ahead, not behind. Side by side. Behind them, beneath the new sign, the pine crate remained in the barn, empty. Months later, Dust would gather along its lid. Wyatt never opened it again. Lillian never asked him to throw it away. It belonged there, a reminder of the man who had once believed love meant knowing when to leave, and the woman who had once believed choosing someone was only something a person did. When every other choice was gone, they had both been wrong. The first time Lillian chose Wyatt Granger, she needed a husband. The second time, she needed nothing from him at all. That was why it mattered, and when the freight bells carried across Cottonwood Fork that spring morning, they turned toward the road together. Years later, the road would still run past Cottonwood Fork. Wagons would come and go. Snow would cover the old tracks. Spring water would uncover them again, and most travelers would never know how close Parker Yard once came to disappearing. But Lillian and Wyatt would know. She had first chosen him because the world had narrowed her choices to almost nothing. He had first stood beside her believing the kindest thing a man could do was leave before his troubles became someone else's burden. Neither of them stayed the same. Lillian learned that accepting another person's hand did not mean surrendering her own strength. Wyatt learned that giving someone freedom was only half of love. The other half was trusting them with the truth and having the courage to remain when they chose you anyway. Maybe that is why the empty crate mattered as much as the new sign above the barn. It was proof that a man prepared to leave had finally found a reason to stay, and that a woman who once needed marriage to protect her future eventually stood on her own land, owing no one her survival, and chose the same man again simply because she loved the life they could build side by side. Sometimes the choice made under pressure gets us through the winter. The choice we make when we are finally free tells us where home really is. If you had been standing in Lillian's place that spring morning, would you have asked Wyatt to stay? And if stories about second chances, quiet courage, and love earned the hard way belong around your fire for a while, subscribe and stay with us. There are more roads ahead, and more stories waiting beyond the next ridge.